Come on in. Hey, Miss Mary. Hey, Keisha. Y'all come on in. It's working. God is working out. One thing I know, one thing I found. Come on in, tag, share. It's working out. It's working out. God is working out. One thing I know. Come on in. Come on in. If you can, tag, share. Come on in. I hope today been a productive day. Good evening. Hey, Trina, I see you. Come on in. Y'all tag, share. Let somebody know that we're on. Come on in. You ever sit back and just look back over your life and saw everything that you've been through, everything that you overcame, things that you're still overcoming, and some things you question, and some things you probably ask God, why me? And then the next question that you want to know, uh, I had to go through so much, and then God say, why not you? Hey, Mr. Greg, y'all come on in, tag, share, and some things in life can't be explained. No matter how much you try to look back over it, no matter what came up against you, some things you cannot explain, no matter how hard you try. And so you just have to come to the conclusion and know that, guess what, if I had to go through this was just part of my making. This was just part of what I had to go through. This was just some things that because of what God has planned for my life. Because in order to become something, you all have to go through a process in order to maintain a certain level of God's glory. You have to suffer some things, and sometimes we don't want to suffer nothing. Sometimes we don't want to have to go through anything, but everything that we go through is purposely. And we cry over relationships, we cry over lost jobs, we cry because friends that we've been having for a long period of time left, no longer there. We cry because things didn't work out the way that we wanted it to work out. And if you already had a premature plan in your mind of how you wanted things to go, and things didn't work that way, and certain people that you depended on and you wanted to always be by your side, and then you realize that they're not by your side. And then when people leave and things happen, and God calls you to turn and go the opposite way of your normal route, we start to question God. Well, why I have to go through this? I can't believe they left. I can't believe this happened, or I can't believe that happened. But the truth of the matter is, we never asked God for guidance. The truth of the matter is, we never took the time out to pray for anything, because a lot of times when we make choices, we have this thing called free will, and we also have this thing called choices. Your choice, you have a chance to choose which way you're gonna go. If you get to a stop sign and it's not a dead end road, you either could turn left, you either could turn right, or you could keep going straight. But you're gonna have to make a decision. And then sometimes that we have this thing that place in our life called free will. We don't think about nothing, we just do it. And so you have to thank you, babe. and you just do it. And so you never really take time out to think about, you know what, if I do this, what will happen? If I do this, what would this cause? What will the side effects be from this? What will I cause inside the spiritual realm if I do this? If I decide that I don't want to do this walk with God, if I decide that I don't want to answer to the calling of my life, what would the consequences be? Who do God have attached to my life that I have to stay saved? Who God has looking at my life that I have to carry myself a certain kind of way? And sometimes we get to the place to say, well, I'm just going to do me. I just want to do me. I don't want to worry about nobody. I don't want to have to worry about who think what of me, because I don't care. I'm just my own person. I'm going to do what I want to do. But the truth of the matter is our life is not our own, because to God is belong. And so you got to realize that when you get to a place of submission to God, because this is the hour we don't want to submit. That's a hard thing to say, submit. And so when you come to the place where you submit to something, that means you have to literally follow the instructions. In the word that God, the Bible uses, is that we abide in Christ and Christ abide in us. Abide means that you have to come subjective to whatever the rulership is. You have to come subjective to whatever the rules and regulations is. Whatever you have to do, you have to follow the rules of the house. And so this is the hour that we don't want to follow nobody's rules. We want to make up our own rules. We want to do what we want to do for us and not worried about what's the effect of what's going to take place, because sometimes we get to the place to where we don't care what's the effect. And so this is the hour we have to start caring about what happened, because we're going to be held accountable on Judgment Day. And that's something when you're not worried about what you're going to be held accountable for, because God tells you that you're going to have to be held accountable for every word that came out of your mouth. And so this is the hour we got to get to the place to know that, guess what, if I say something wrong, or if I do something wrong, it can and it will be used against me for Judgment Day. And so this is the hour that you want to count up your choices. You want to make sure that you're making the right choices. You want to make sure that when you say something, that is heaven getting a response from it. Do you shake the foundations of hell, or are you partaking in the things that the enemy wants you to partake in? Because this is what I learned, that life is not an easy thing, but you have to know. And like they say, it don't come with an instruction book, but the book that it does come with is Bible. And the Bible gives us the instructions of what we need to do in order to suffice and to do what God have called us to do. And so when I ask you the question, what did you build your house on? And we don't never want to say what we build our house on, but the truth of the matter is you have to build from somewhere. What did you build your house on? Because this is the hour that your life will literally speak what you're building your house on. Why? Because if your words is more powerful than your actions, then it lets you know that your words have power. If your action is more powerful than your words, then it lets you know that you're not only a talker, you're a be about it, you know. And so this is the hour that God not only want to hear our words, but he want to see our doing. And so that's why they say faith without works is dead, meaning you can have faith and believe God for something, but if you don't have no work behind it, it doesn't mean anything. And so tonight is the night that God had me go back. I don't know about y'all, but God been having me look back over my life. God been let me look over everything that I had to go through and everything that I've been through. And so when God had me looking over things like that, it's for a purpose. Because one thing about God, when God bring you through something, or when God have you going through a transition for something, it's not just to go through it, it's for a purpose. So tell somebody, whatever I'm going through is for purpose, to be in purpose for my purpose. So you got to realize when God had me going over my life and everything that I've been through in ministry, because next month my anniversary coming up, how long that I've been in the ministry. And so now when I look back and I walk down the road called past, I think about everything that I went through. I think about all the decisions I made, and I think about what I caused, or what I didn't do, or when I went against what God had told me to do. And so that's why this is the hour that you have to literally start going back and look over your life, because a lot of times the reason why we where we at is because decisions that we made is self-inflicted wounds. This is the hour that we can't blame nobody for being where we at, because we had a choice. We either had a choice to go with it, or we had a choice to go against it. We had a choice to eat it, or we had a choice to push away from the table. You can't blame nobody for the weight that you gained, because they wasn't the one that sat to the table and ate. You was the one that sat to the table and ate. And so this is the hour that you got to realize what God is doing. And God is trying to set us to the place to where he set standards. He's trying to set us to the place to know that, guess what? Whatever we doing and whatever we did, is it accountable to the things of God? And so this is the hour you got to realize, am I, what I'm doing, is it accountable? Will it be held against me, or will it give account for what I did? And so this is the hour of accountability. And so when I come to you and I tell you that, what did you build your house on? Because as I walked down the street called Pads, when my ministry first started, I didn't know what I was doing. Everything happened for a reason. Everything, because a lot of times people think that you choose these things, but not everybody choose this. When you chosen, you don't have a choice in the matter. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that God chose me to do this for such a time as this. I didn't understand it at the time, because if God would have had to give me a decision, what I wanted to do, pastoralship probably wouldn't have been what I would have choose. I probably would have choose something else, because I always tell people, if I didn't have a church, because I grew up in a family that my grandmother, she had a club, and my aunts and them, they all had clubs. So I know literally if I wouldn't have a church, I'll be in a club business. And so, but when God have a plan for your life, when God have a plan for you to go opposite direction, when God have already set up and orchestrated what he wants you to do and where he wants you to be, he will set up the circumstances. He will set up the stage called life of the place that he needs you to go and the things that he needs you to do. And so I didn't realize at the time when I was growing up, my grandmother raised me. Irene George Brooks raised me. My grandmother raised me, but I didn't understand at the time that when I was a little girl, my mom, when she left, and when she moved to Houston, because that's where she's from, and when she left, and my dad, we was with my dad, and then my grandmother took us, and my grandmother raised us. But my grandmother was always a church going woman, and we always had to go to church, and I used to go to Star Pilgrim. I was raised up under Cyrus V. Jackson, and so everybody that knew New Iberia knew that he was one of the biggest pastors in New Iberia. And so we would have to get up at 6:30 in the morning. I kid you not. And I don't know how church would start that early in the morning, but it would be packed. And I was a junior usher in church. And man, we would be so upset. And we would be, oh man, we always have to get up and go to church. And then it's almost like on Sundays was our time of work, because we would leave to go to church at about 5:30, because my grandmother sometimes would cook in the cafeteria. And then from that church, from Star Pilgrim, we would go home. And so it would be about 7 something, 8 o'clock, and we would get dressed and get ready for my aunt to pick us up, and then we'll start a church tour. I would always call it a church tour, because we would go through so many churches on Sundays. And I used to always say, when I get older, I'm not going to ever go to church, because guess what? We didn't church enough, but not knowing that God was orchestrating me for such a time as this, not knowing that God was building a foundation that I didn't know that one day I was going to have to stand on. And I was the one that would always write poems. And so every time my family would give something at a church, because my Uncle Junior and my nanny, they had a church. So every time they would give something, I would always have to read a poem. And even though it was my family and I would be around all the time, but they still would set me up to read a poem. And I would be nervous reading a poem, but not knowing that God was setting the foundation for where I'm at right now. I need y'all to walk with me down the street called Pass. And so I didn't realize that God was setting me up. God was preparing me for where I was going. I didn't take the route. I didn't know what ticket I was buying, but I know I was being prepared. And so the thing about going to church back in the day, we didn't have a choice in the matter. When my grandmother firmly believed that me and my house gonna serve the Lord, that means everybody that was in her house on a Sunday had to go to somebody's church. Nobody was staying home. And so we went. And so not knowing that every time something would happen, they was always put me on a front, and I would always have to participate in, and not knowing I didn't always want to participate, but I had to participate, but not knowing once again God was preparing me for such a time as this. And then as I begin to walk, and as I begin to grow into the things of God, because at the beginning you have to understand that God, our grandmother introduced me to God, but then I found out who God was when I heard this thing called life. And one thing about life will teach you lessons that wisdom cannot tell you, because a lot of times that wisdom trying to talk to us and we don't want to receive wisdom. So when life starts talking, you don't have no other choice but to listen to what life is saying. And so you have to realize that I wasn't understanding that God was literally getting my foundation ready. He was really getting me to the place. So where, guess what? My grandmother grew up on God. Whenever the pastor, whenever they had something going on, my grandmother would run for queen. She would win almost every year. And guess what? But nothing came before God. And so I always looked at her life and always wondered why everything is about God and everything is about church. And by us growing up and by us being young teenagers, we wonder why nobody never could tell us nothing, and why we never could go nowhere. And we like, where everybody else going, why we always have to stay in the house, and not realizing that God was having my grandmother protect my all, not knowing that God had my grandmother protecting us. I'm like, golly, we can't never even go to the baseball game and football game. No, man, we always have to stay in the house. And so, as young teenagers, we would always do stuff out the box, because where there's a will, we'll make a way. But not knowing that God was preparing me for such a time as this, not knowing that I was going to have to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, not knowing that I was going to have to be the one that was guided by God's staff, not knowing that this thing called life is going to start talking to me. And when this thing called life started talking to me, some things I did not understand, but I guarantee you that God would always send somebody to help interpret what he was telling me. And so not realizing that, guess what, as I start to grow and as I start to live life in, as I start to go through this journey, and as I start to go through things I didn't understand why I was going through, not understanding why I had to feel like that I was in this place by myself. And so many nights I cried and I walked the floor, and many nights I asked God, well, what you're doing? Because I don't think I need to be going through this. But how many of us know that when you're being prepared, when you're being processed for the purpose, that God don't ask you what you want to go through, and God don't ask you how you feel, and God don't ask you if you feel like you're ready for this. No, it's ready or not, because here he come. And so as I was going through the process, and not knowing that I was going through the fire, and not knowing I was made under pressure, and not worrying about nobody else, and then when somebody came inside my life and spoke in my life, and I used to go to churches and they would speak in my life and say how powerful I was going to be, and how I was going to be a woman of God that God called me to be. And I'll never forget sitting inside believers way to the back, and they had a conference, and it was as far as the people as the eye could see, and this man came find me way to the back, sitting down with my son Ledet, because at the time I only had Ledet. And that man spoke in my life, and he said, God is going to take you to a place that you never begin, and you're going to walk heavy. And I'm looking at him like, I don't know what you're talking about, but okay, I receive it. Because guess what, I was living in ignorance. I wasn't understanding what he was saying. But if he was saying it, if I was in church, it was that plant the seed inside my spirit to let me know that, guess what, this is the time that you start. I'm like, well, I don't understand what he's talking about, but undoubtedly God saw something. And as I begin, then God started to feed me, and God started to allow me to go through certain things, and certain things I didn't want to go through. And it seemed like I spent more time in the valley than I did on top of the mountain. And so you got to realize that when you're in a valley experience, that means you're in a low place. That means that you have to realize that it's water inside the low place, because inside the valley, even though it's a valley, you still see grass, you still see shrubs, you still see grass. So it lets you know that it's water coming from somewhere, but not knowing that in my valley experience that I was being made. And so when I decided to take the position as pastoralship, because it's a long story behind that, so some things I'm gonna just jump because I have to get to the point. And so as I began to walk, and then God started me off with a certain group group of people, and then they left, and then that was all right, because guess what? I ministered to chairs for years on at a time that people don't understand. I spoke to chairs because I just assumed if the people wasn't there, it was angels that showed up in the seats. And my husband used to tell me, he said, "Babe, you mean to tell me you going back there in Bible study, you just by yourself?" I said, "Yeah, but babe, you know what? I promised God an hour." So rather the people showed up or not, I still had to go. Know why? Because God had me in training. God had me in boot camp. God had me in training. God wanted to know, will I speak the word in season and out of season? He wanted to know, will I speak the word? Rather, one people show up or nobody showed up, because this word is still a living word. And so I went on to do it, and I would give God my time. And then God started filling up the church once again, and then not realizing what God was doing. And so God had to take my hand and guide me, because at the beginning of my stages of pastoralship, nobody didn't believe in me. Nobody didn't believe that I was called. Nobody didn't believe I was chosen. Everybody church that I used to go support, I thought they would be the ones to help me, but they was the ones that put their mouth on me, and they said, "Oh, you never did this and you never did that," and you, and I'm like, well, nobody never gave me a chance, because somebody have to start off somewhere. But it's something when God have a plan for your life, no matter who reject you, God gonna still accept you. And so I went on, and so they said that we was just a bunch of children playing with God, and we just a church full of women and punks and just all kind of stuff. It's like we was the laughter of Liberia. But guess what? I stayed with my face toward the mark, which was God. I stayed with my face praying. I didn't understand what was going on. I shut off my ears to those things, because I know I had to focus on God, and God started to walk me through, and God started to teach my spirit. Let me tell y'all, what y'all seeing now is a product still not finished by the Lord. But let me tell you that guess what? It started off, and then God allowed me to move on Main Street. We came because we started off with the house behind the house, because when we bought our first house, we had a mother-in-law suite, and so we had dedicated that to God as a church. But when God said it was time to move, he gave me favor on Main Street. And so my first storefront was in the Seminoles parking lot across from the DMV, and that was my first church for Greater Works. And then God started to expand, and God started to grow. And can I tell you that God gave me specific instructions, and God told me, he said, "Let me tell you this." He said, "I need Bible study on Tuesdays, midweek service on Thursdays, 1 hour of power on Saturdays, and then you have church on Sundays." And we start to do that, right? And then all of a sudden that, people start to complain, they couldn't come because there was too much church and stuff like that. And so I'm like, well, okay, because at the time I was still young. I was just trying to fit in. I was just trying to feel my way in. And so what I started doing, I canceled our midweek service, and I started canceling out the different stuff that God never told me to cancel out. But when I start canceling out, do you not know it started a spiral inside my church, and it started chaos inside my church, because I was taking away the very thing that God told me to put in. And so this is the hour you got to realize, once God tell you to do something, it doesn't matter what man say, you still got to follow the instructions of God, because at the end of the day, you're going to still have to pay the penalty. And so all hell has started breaking loose. And then God gave me another set of instructions. He said, "Now I need you to start having church on a Saturday." Y'all, I didn't understand what the Sabbath was. I didn't know this. I'm telling y'all that God was imputing this inside my spirit, and God was showing me how to go to a place. And then he had started teaching me about the feast. I didn't know nothing about the feast. That's why when I do what I do, it was taught by the Holy Spirit. And ain't nobody could tell me better, because I did not know. But God showed me along the way, and God showed me what to do. And so then I put my church on Saturdays, and my husband said, "Babe, you sure?" He said, "Because on Saturdays, that's when everybody spend time with their families and everything." And I said, "Well, know what, babe? I got to do what God say do." I said, "If they don't come, well, guess what? We're going to still do it." Because guess what? That was the time that, guess what? I was sold out for God. I was going on fast. I was going on absolute. So I was hearing from the Spirit. And so do you know that everybody started coming on Saturdays? We even started getting visitors that wanted to come visit, and they would come visit. And then all of a sudden, that God had the prophetic on my life, and I would start to prophesy, and people was drawn to my prophecies, and everybody wanted me to go preach to their church, and everybody wanted me to do this and do that, and I never did things for money because I knew this is what God had called me to do, and so I would go and do it. And so after a while, can I tell you, when people start seeing that what I was preaching, it wasn't cars and houses, it wasn't husband and wives, I was preaching what thus says the Lord, get your house in order. And so they start saying, when I come, I don't preach good news. When I come, I don't preach good tidings, but yet I still had to preach what God called me to preach, and nobody could take it away. All you had a choice is not to invite me back, but while I was there, I had to go there on assignment and do what God had called me to do. And so this is the hour that, guess what, God got me to a place, and then I befriended some people. You got to realize that God will have you walk in this walk. People that start off with you will not finish with you, but they had a part in putting something in you or taking something away. And so all you got to do is just give God praise, because I'm here to tell you, if it happened for a reason. Because one thing about God, I know that God wrote the chapters of my book. And when God wrote the chapters of my book, what I didn't realize, that I wanted certain people to stay. I wanted certain people to always be with me. But God had to birth something inside of me. He had to birth me out of people. He had to birth me out myself. So God calls chaos, and chaos moved through the church in order to separate some stuff, in order to get me to the next place. And in the middle of chaos, God was speaking in the midst of the storm that God allowed to go on. God allowed betrayal. God allowed backstabbing. God revealed some stuff even about me. And God had to show me, are you in this for people, or are you in this for me? I'm here to tell y'all a story. I'm here to walk it out, because I need to know, what are you building your house on? And so I built my house on certain ones, and it seemed like that certain ones was never supposed to leave. And then I had to go through a brain surgery. Let me tell y'all something. When you get down on your knees and pray, and you ask God for something, you don't realize what you're really asking God for. So guess, can I put it in reverse? Let's go back when it was the house behind the house, because I got down on my knees and I told God this. I said, God, I'll be the slaughter for my sheep, not even realizing what I was opening up my mouth to, not realizing what I was saying. I said, God, I'll be the slaughter for the sheep, not realizing that a month later, my nose was going to start leaking. And I told my husband, I say, my nose leaking. He said, go to the doctor. I went to the doctor. I said, well, she think that it's my sinuses, but I know it's not my sinuses. I know it's something else. And so my husband started to look up the symptoms. He said, well, you need to go to an ENT, because it seemed like a cerebral fluid coming from your head. And so when I went to the ENT, he gave me a cup. He said, if you fill this up, bring it back to me. I said, well, I don't have to bring it back to you. I can fill it up now. And then he said, he sent me straight to Lafayette General to take some tests, and not realizing it was fluid coming from my head. And so you got to realize, they didn't understand, how could this happen? They say, did you get in a bad car accident, or was you ever hit in the head real hard? He said, what caused this? Because they wasn't understanding. When I tell you, when you say something with your mouth, you just never know what you're going to have to go through. People see you when you're a butterfly, but where you was when I was in my cocoon, where you was when I was a caterpillar, where were you when I was in a pupa? Because guess what? It was different stages in order to become where I am now. And so, not realizing I was going to have to go through my first brain surgery. What people don't realize, that I had to cut inside of my mouth, pull my face back. And guess what? God had to go in and do it. Because guess what? When I went back to the hospital, they had to get inside my nose and cut the staples out of my nose. And I didn't believe it, because guess what? When I tried to put my makeup on, when I came back, my makeup fell off my face, because my skin wasn't back on my bones yet. So let me tell y'all this. When y'all look at me, just don't assume that this happened and that happened. No, I had to pay a price for this. And that's why I never understood why God never really let me hook hook up with people, and God never really let me hook up with cliques, or if I tried, God will cause something to happen to where it will separate, because God said, I don't need you contaminated. You got to realize, because I will look at others and see how others will come in cliques, and how others over here doing it, and God, it seemed like, why I'm not there? God said, because I never called you to be part of the crowd. He said, I called you to be away from the crowd. You got to understand what God was doing. And so now I went through my first brain surgery, and then not knowing that I was going to have to go through another brain surgery 3 months later. That's why I say people don't understand what you had to go through. And then my nose started leaking again. And I'm saying, God, but I'm telling everybody that you're a wonder working God and how powerful you are. I said, God, so why would I have to go through this again? He said, because we have some downtimers. He said, because they don't see the wound, that's why they don't believe that you've been through what you've been through. And can I tell you, people was looking at me as if I was a ghost, because there wasn't understanding why I was back so fast, why I was walking around so fast, because you have to understand, they had people that prayed against me. They had people that spoke death against me. But can I tell you, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. No tongue that rises against me, it shall be condemned. You got to realize, if God be for me, who gonna be against me? And so you got to realize this. It didn't matter what they did, because guess what? I'll stand behind God, and he's too high that you can't go over, and he's too low, you can't go under, and for sure he's too wide, you can't go around him. And so you had to go to him to get to me. And so this is the hour that, guess what, I went on into my first storefront, not realizing that I was going to have to go through another brain surgery. And this time they had to cut through my head. You got to realize, when something is on your life, and when God's trying to get something out of your life, and when God is trying to move your faith up another level, you're going to go through some things. You're going to go through some storms. You're going to go through some heartaches. But can I tell you, you shall be still standing. I'm here to ask you, what is your house built on? And before I finish telling you the story, let me tell you, Matthew 7:24 through 27, it says this, it says, therefore, whoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house up on a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and bare upon the house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And everyone that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not shall be likened unto a foolish man which built his house on sand. And the rain descended, and the flood came, and the winds blew, and it beat up against the house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. And I had to say this so I could finish, because what you don't realize, as I was going through the different brain surgeries, guess what? People was coming and people was going, and God was showing me who people is. And in the midst of some leaving, I was angry, I was upset, I was like, I can't believe they left, because they can't say I did nothing, because I was in a process of being healed, but yet everybody had something to say. And God said, this is the hour I need you to get over yourself. That's something when you feel like that you're standing in a place by yourself and nobody there to hold your hand. And so now I feel like Paul, that now I have to make it on broken pieces. It seems like that I'm shipwrecked, and yet I still have to make it on broken pieces. I don't have time to sink. I don't have time to go under, because I was never built on sand. I was built on a rock. And you have to understand, God said, if I build my rock, he said, I build my church on these rocks, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And you want to know why I'm still standing tall? Because God built greater works. And you got to understand that, guess what? Everything had to come with a process. And so I'm here to tell you, long as you build your house on God, and you're not building your house on people, you're going to be able to stand the test of times. Yeah, people going to come and people going to go, but yet you're going to still be able to stand the test of time. Sometimes it's going to hurt, and sometimes they're going to leave you. But God said, this is the hour. You just have to kiss them and say goodbye. Sometimes you're going to get to the place where you will understand why you're going through what you're going through, but yet you got to keep reminding yourself, on this rock I'm being built. You got to realize that God said what come, guess what? It doesn't matter, because you're going to still stand when people looking for you to fall. I remember that we went in on my second storefront. It was on the other end of Main Street, and that was my third brain surgery. I had to go there, and I remember my husband coming. He said, babe, if you don't come back to church, he said, you ain't gonna have a church to come back to. So many left in that dispensation, and I had to go preach in my church with 50 staples in my head. You got to understand what I had to go through to get where I'm at. I had to preach with 50 staples in my head, and that's why when people say, oh, they ain't coming to church because they have a headache or they got this going on or that going on, I just shake my head, because I know at once upon a time I was sitting inside church with 50 staples in my head preaching. And you got to understand that guess what? I was preaching, I was hurt, I was broken. I didn't understand why I had to go through what I had to go through, but God had to expose who was in my camp. God had to expose the ones that was from me really wasn't from me. God had to expose who had the daggers in my back, and that was the ones that smiled in my face. Can I tell you, this is the hour God is going to reveal who for you and who not for you. God going to reveal who against you and who is coming up for you. God said this was the hour. I had to realize that not everybody that cried, Lord, Lord, means Lord, Lord. He said, but get over yourself, because if they did it to me first, they're going to do it to you. And yet I still went on preaching. And so I got to a place where it was just me, my husband, and my children, and Elder Renee and her girls, and they always stayed with me. That was a picture of loyalty, because one thing about Elder, she never got out the boat. She just picked up the buckets and started throwing the water out to make sure we don't sink. And wherever I went, she was there, and she's still there with me, her and her girls. You got to realize that God has set up people with you that's pillars inside there, and they gonna be the ones that's not gonna leave you. Some gonna come and some gonna go, and they gonna be the ones to stay. You got to realize what God was showing me, and I was crying, and I'm like, God, how can I maintain this? Because it seemed like that, guess what? It was too much for me to handle. And so God said, now it's time to downgrade. And you have to know that what I was thinking, I was thinking that it's going to be better. I was thinking what my enemies was going to say. You got to realize that at the beginning, I was a people prophet. I was a people pleaser. And I was so concerned about what the haters was going to say and how they was going to talk down on me. I wasn't worried about nothing else. And God said, catch your head. And so now God says it's time to downgrade. Can I tell you, just because you have to downgrade, long as you ain't down and out, that's all that matters. And so now I had to go to a smaller building. And while God had me in transitions, they had the ones talking that greater works about to close. Oh, God don't like ugly, and God gonna shut the doors. But what they didn't realize, I was the house that God built. You got to realize that even though they come up against you, you got to realize you are the one that God built. They didn't realize how strong you was. They didn't realize that you really had a prayer life with God. Even though that the enemies came together to come up against me, can I tell you, I still stood 10 toes down, and I was ready to fight for the Lord. You got to realize that, guess what? I couldn't let discouragement get in a place. I couldn't let disappointment get in a place. I had to keep moving. And can I tell you, I was disappointed, because the ones that I thought was going to always be with me, they left. Because God said, I had to show you this. He said in Psalms 118, he said, I tell you, he said, put your trust in the Lord. Don't put your trust in man. And so I started depending on them, and I no longer was depending on God. And so God had to show me, I'm your keeper. I'm the one that never leave y'all, forsake you. I need to let you know that, guess what? If you can't get with me, I'm the only one that's there for you. He said, I allowed this to happen to let you know that you was never built on a people. You was built on the word of God. And so you have to realize that I had to start over from scratch. But the thing about starting over from scratch, the foundation was still steady. The foundation was still there. Can I tell somebody, if the winds came and the winds blew, the hurricane came, and it seemed like it was going to knock me over, but yet I was still standing because I was standing on the word, and if God said it, it settles it. I'm here to tell somebody, this is not the time to give up. You got to keep moving. This is not the time to get discouraged. You got to keep moving. When God made me realize, he said, I wrote the chapters of your book. He said, in each chapter, you got to realize that I wrote new people in, and I wrote some old people out. He said, this didn't have nothing to do with them. This have to do with how I wrote your story. And so when you get to the place to know that your life has to do with how God wrote your story, and then you won't be so caught up in who there for you and who not, because this is how God wrote your story. And God wants you to know, guess what? He is the author and finisher of my faith. And so God want to know, where are you now? He said, where are you now? I say, God, it seems like that I'm by myself. He's saying, that's how I want you. I say, God, it seems like everybody else gathering together, and it seems like that I'm by myself. He said, that's how I want you. He said, because this is the hour. I'm about to reveal who you are to the nations. He said, this is the hour. He said, I'm about to reveal what I've been hiding. He said, in secret. He said, I don't need you to get a bunch of chickens. He said, I need you. You are eagle, and an eagle flies solo. An eagle flies by themselves. You got to realize that you are eagle, and that's why you have to be by yourself. You can't always be with family. You can't always have friends, because this is the hour. God want to know, can you fly solo? God want to know, if I call you to be in isolation, and if I call you to be by yourself, can you stand? Or do you feel like that you always need somebody by you? And this is the hour that God had to show me. He said, some gonna come, some gonna go. He said, it's not because they bad or y'all was good. He says, because they was not wrote in this part of your story. And so as I begin to understand, and then I start to get into the place with God, and all I have to do is pray. And as I begin to get in a place with God, I still hear the talk. I still heard the murmuring, and I still heard how they was slandering my name, and how they was talking about me, and how I think I'm all that, and how I don't associate with people. Well, come on, read my book, and let me tell you the story. You got to realize I'm the way that God made me, and I'm the way that God created me. If it's meant for me to be with you, God gonna write you in my chapter. If it's not meant for me to be with you, you're not gonna be in my chapter. This is the hour that God said that all eyes is on him. He said the eyes is no longer on people. You got to be careful who you rubbing your shoulders with. Or you just with people for elevation. Or you just with people because you think they can open the door for you. Or you with people because you think they can give you a bigger platform. But my Bible tells me that God gonna make my name great. And when God get ready for me to hit the platform, he's gonna establish it himself. It's not gonna be by might. It's not gonna be by nobody else. It's gonna be by power of God. And whoever God gonna need me to be with, that's who God gonna connect me with. God gonna be the one to usher somebody inside his presence, because now my name is in the wind. My name is in the wind. God got my name in rooms that I never made yet. God got somebody watching me that I don't even know, but yet they taking notes. And let me tell you something. What you see is being processed, because God already knew when he was going to take me there. I wasn't going there for likes. I wasn't going for money. I was going to declare the works of God. And I was going to tell the people, get their house in order. I was going to tell the people, it's time to come out the grave. It's time to come out the cave. I heard you right. God says it's time to come out the grave, because some stuff you're buried under, and it's time for you to come out the cave, because you've been hiding too long and don't want to walk the walk that God gave you. And so this is the hour that God is raising up a remnant. God is raising up true prophets. God is raising up true apostles. Everybody is caught up in the name, but they can't carry the currency of the name. They can't carry the potency of what the name carries. You call yourself a prophet. You call yourself an apostle. currency because a dollar is just a dollar. But if it don't have the currency to back it, it don't mean nothing. This is the hour of power. This is the hour of miracles, signs, and wonders. You've been saying you love God. You've been saying that God is this and that. But God said when it's time for you to show up, can you show up? Are you too busy trying to see who you could connect to so your name could be in lights? But this is the hour. God says he's pulling down the name brand and he's raising up the non-name brand. He said, because this is the hour. You ain't going to follow the name. You're going to follow the anointing. This is the hour that God not inside the big thing. God is inside the small. He said, this is the place that I'm dwelling. He said, these are the places that I got my name. So this is the hour. God says, stop counting numbers and count what God is doing right now. I spoke to the woman of God earlier because they say churches like us is small churches. But I promise you, we are power packing church. I promise you, if you come sit down inside the atmosphere, you won't leave out the same way you came. I promise you, our house is a house of prayer. Our house is a house of manifestation. And we don't put on for our city. That's how God created us to be. Because before anybody go forward with anything, everybody got to get on the altar. We don't do nothing until God has shown himself inside the place. You got to realize this is the hour. God is looking for a place where he could dwell. God is looking for a place for his glory. You got to understand what God is doing right now. God said, I'm raising up the ones that nobody didn't know nothing about. I'm raising up the ones that everybody had their mouth on. He said, I'm raising up the ones because y'all in it to win it. And you not in it to grow popularity. I'm not in it to make fans or friends. I said I'd rather tell you the truth so I can save your soul than to sugarcoat it and you'll be busting hell wide open. This is the hour that God is raising up the true remnant. The true remnant won't compromise. The true remnant gonna walk in the truth of God. This is the hour of the imputed righteousness. This is the hour that God is not playing no games. This is the hour that you're going through clearance. That means you got to get checked before you mount up. This is the hour that God is taking you higher. Before you could even go to the next gate, you first got to get clearance. You got to get clearance for where you're going. Are you ready for clearance? I don't know about nobody else, but God said, I'm giving you clearance. I didn't know why I had to go through what I had to go through, but God says only was processing you for clearance. And that's something when God got to give you clearance for where you're going, because nobody else know like you know. Like they say, nobody know the trouble of this world. Nobody know the nights you had to walk the floor. Nobody know the tears that you had to cry. Nobody knew when you felt like you was by yourself and you're abandoned. And you're looking at everybody else lying about you. Come to me and tell me, like they say, go to the horse. Ask the horse, go straight to the head. Don't find out about who I am through nobody else. Come straight to me if you want to know. Don't believe the lies. Isn't that something that a lie could catch a ride anywhere? But the truth walk alone, and that's okay. Because guess what? Some people that God wanted me to connect with, because the lie caught a ride with them, and then they just kept going. But God said, always remember this, daughter, that you speak truth, so the truth gonna always be by itself, and I'm all right with that. No, it's not that I'm a hater, because I don't hate on nobody, and no, I don't ever try to compare my anointing to nobody, and no, I'm never in competition with nobody. And if I ever step inside a place and I see somebody competing, I will literally move myself back from the equation because I already know who I am in the Lord. And once I know who I am in the Lord, I don't have to justify to nobody because God already justified me and he already qualified me. And so this is the hour. If you know who you are, you don't have to be worried about being in line with competition. You don't have to worry about the naysayers because you need them. Because guess what? It's extra. Read all about it. Because guess what? A dawning of a new day is coming. And God is calling the real soldiers to rise up. And when we rise up, we're going to condemn whoever it is that God needs us to do. And God said, this is the hour. We're going to move forward because he's rising up an army that's not worried about what you say or how you feel. This is the army that surpasses that. This is the army that God is raising up that's going to stamp it and let you know it's time for you to get back in a place where supersede where you once was with God. Because God not going to sugarcoat it just because it's you sinning. Because you have to understand that God said even the righteous going to scarcely make it in. So this is the hour to know when you see me, you see process. When you see me, you see a journey. When you see me, I got war wounds. Even an eagle know when it's ready to go for rest. It looks for a mountain that been through something. It looks for the highest peak. It looks for something rugged, but yet still standing. And know what I'm that? Because guess what? I'm still standing by the help of the good Lord. And this is the hour. If you want to tell me something, let me see your war wounds. If you want to tell me how to overcome something, let me see your war wounds. If you never died, you can't tell me what color God is. You can't tell me how his name was pronounced. Because what y'all didn't know about my second brain surgery is some may know that I died. And they didn't even let my husband know. And then when they did come tell him, it was like 4 or 5 hours later. You got to realize they didn't know how I was going to make it. They kept me by the operating room for 3 days because they wasn't sure if they're going to have to do emergency surgery. But can I tell you one thing about it? When I went in, I had God do it. I had God. When I came out, I had him. Because guess what? I didn't went in there troubled. I wasn't troubled in the middle of it. Because one thing I did know, if God brought me to it, he's going to bring me through it. And he's going to get me out. And so when you see me and you see how I'm preaching, because people don't think that I preach feel-good messages. I just don't have time for it. I don't have time to preach a house or car. If your credit good and you work, you're going to have that regardless because atheists have that. If you're doing what God say doing and you stand in line and position and waiting on your husband and you're preparing yourself, you're going to have that too. But this is the hour I got to preach. Guess what? God hates sin. He loves each and every one of us, but that don't stop him from hating sin. He can't look up on sin. If you want to know why he can't look up on sin, remember when Jesus was on the cross, he said, my Father, why have thou forsaken me? Because on the cross he had sin and God could not answer him. God could not look up on him, but he know he had to go through a process. He know he had to overcome the journey. And I'm here to encourage somebody. It may seem like that you're by yourself, but God said how you could be by yourself. And I say I never leave you or forsake you. And it seemed like that everywhere you go, you're running. David said it best. He said, where can I go that I can run from the Lord? Because if I make my bed on the water, he's there. If I make my bed in hell, he's there. Where can you go that you go run from the Lord? He's omnipotent present. He's everywhere at one time. This is the hour. Be all right with being by yourself. This is the hour being all right with doing what God called you to do. Be all right with just being bored and being to your house. You can still live life. You can still enjoy life. God just wants you to do it decent and in order. This is the hour. How can we be the blueprint for the world when we looking just like the world? When the world don't know the difference between saved and unsaved, because we try to participate with the world to make the world come in, but don't realize we pushing the world out. This is the hour of sacredness. This is the hour of holiness. This is the hour to know how to dress yourself in the presence. This is the hour to know how to humble yourself. Because can I tell y'all one thing? Even though I'm a pastor, even though I'm a prophet at times, even though I'm a teacher at times, and I'm an elect apostle at times, I still know who I stand when I walk out the doors and come to my house. Because guess what? My husband covered me. And I don't think that guess what? I rule over my husband because my husband is my ultimate ruler. My husband is the one that covered me. My husband is the one that I pray. I know about structure and order because Bishop B.K. Stevens and co-pastor Yolanda is my spiritual covering. So I already know about order. I already know about structure. You got to get it. You got to get to the place to know who you are and stop trying to identify yourself through people, things, and places. Because guess what? I'm going to be Harold and Denise Brooks Ledet long as I live. It doesn't matter if you see me or don't see me. I'm going to be still her. I'm going to be the one that was anointed by the Lord before the beginning of time. I'm still her. I'm going to be the one that had to go through 3 brain surgeries. I'm still her. I'm going to be the one that's married to Addis Ledet Sr. I'm still her. I'm going to be the mother of my 3 sons, Addis, Stephon, Elijah, and Avant. I'm still her. And I got my grandbabies. I'm still her. You got to realize, just because I carry a title, that don't make me not be her. Because guess what? I'll stand 10 toes down and tell you who I am. And one thing they do know, that when God allowed me to open my mouth, and when I speak a word, it don't fall to the ground. And so guess what? You might not like me, but you're going to respect who I am. It's all right if you talk about me. They talked about Jesus, but God's still with me. It doesn't matter if you try to pray against me, because your prayers don't make him not want to do for me, because God said you can't curse what God already blessed. And so I'm here to tell y'all a story about a little black girl from New Iberia that God is raising up for such a time as this. And God said you ain't seen none yet. So I had to cry a river. I had to be in a place of isolation. I had to be by myself. They left me for dead, but they didn't check my pulse. They prayed against me that I die. But guess what? I shall live, says the Lord, because on this rock, he built me, and no gates of hell gonna prevail. And so this is the hour I could tell you, come from if you wanna, but you got to know what you don't see is my angels. You don't see the host of angels that's backing me. You got to realize when I realized who I was, and stop trying to identify myself through people, or I wanted to do this and do that, and I didn't want to do it just for God. No, I wanted to do it to show my enemies until God chasing me. And when God said, get out your own way, get out your own head, come to yourself, he said, then I can work with you. And I said, God, I don't want to be like Saul. It is for people that I'm losing my way, and you reject for putting me in position. And so this is the hour. You got to know that I'm not in this for people. I'm in this for God. And I love winning souls for God. I love telling you the truth and not trying to sugarcoat it. I let it be your choice, because it's either your choice to accept it or reject it. God even said it better. He said, you have the hot or cold, because if you lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out. That means God going to make up your mind for you. He said, choose this day whom you going to serve. And so that's why I'm in a place that I choose this day I'm going to serve. And one woman told me, Mama Camille, she said, rather you do it on the street corner, she said, your life depend on it. She said, you don't matter what nobody say. He said, if you have to preach to the streets, preach to the streets. She said, because if you ever think about walking away, she said, it won't mean you no good. So can I tell y'all this? What you see me doing, my life depend on it. What you see me studying, my life depend on it. No, it's not just for me, but it's for something bigger, and it's called the kingdom. I'm not trying to build my church. I'm trying to build the kingdom. I'm one that we're going to come in it all the way or none of the way. It's not even about no names. It's only about the name Jesus. He said, my name be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto me. And so all I can say is Jesus. All I can say is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Because at the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow. At the name of Jesus, every tongue shall confess. And so I had to let y'all know that guess what? I'm a storm that's brewing. So don't come by me. Like they say, so don't come for me. Because this is the hour that I'm not playing. Because it's time. Time is the essence. We don't have time to play church. We got to be about our Father's business. This is not the time to keep trying to build. When God keeps telling you you're not chosen to do this, and you still want to be on the front line, this is the hour, know your position. This is the hour, know your place. This is the hour, know when you're chosen and when people call you, because there's a difference. So I had to come on here to tell y'all tonight, on what foundation that you build. When I was being built, I was built by God. But I allowed some things to come in my way because God had to rebuke me so many times. God even had stopped talking to me, but he allowed the spirit to be on me long as I could do what he had called me to do. This is the hour when you punish, you punish. This is the hour that God don't play. Have I been perfect? No, but I learned in my imperfection. Am I great? I'm great in the things of God. Well, God called me to be great in. Did I make mistakes? Always, still do. Am I perfect? No, never that. But I'm reaching for perfection because God still say holiness is still right. This is the hour to find out who you are. This is the hour to identify who you are. This is the hour to know that guess what? I'm in it to win it. And yeah, next year adds another year to the journey of my life that I've been doing this. And not only another year in ministry, but God spare for me to live to see August the 18th, I'll be 50 years old. So nobody cannot tell me that there isn't a God. Some people used to say, a woman not supposed to tell her age, baby. I'm all right to tell my age. I'm going to be 50 years old. And guess what? That's a grace that God has placed on my life. And God spared me to live to see it. I'm going to give him praise. Because this is the hour you got to know who you are. This is the hour you can't be in it about people. You can't be counted and feel discouraged and assume God don't show up because people don't show up. Because God will show up when nobody show up. I learned that the hard way. But remember, when God is trying to show you something, always listen when he's talking through the storm. Always know when he's talking. Because God don't always talk when sun's shining. God will talk through a whirlwind and God will talk through a storm. But all you have to do is have listening ears. So I just wanted to share some of my journey because some of you know and some of you might not know. But guess what? It's been a journey. And guess what? I thank God for it. I thank God that God entrusted me to be the under shepherd over the sheep that he had placed in my care. And I'm mindful. And yes, I learned from my mistakes. I'm a hard pastor. I don't play games. I'm going to tell you the truth and love you all at the same time. But at the end of the day, I want you to make sure that the decisions you make, that it's not going to affect your walk with God. So I thank you guys for tuning in with me tonight. I'll be back tomorrow because I said I was going to be consistent. And I thank God that God allowed me to be consistent this week. And so I'll see y'all on tomorrow. I love you guys. And y'all be blessed. Thanks for tuning in. Y'all have a blessed night. Amen and amen.